Hello and welcome to this Python and Django live coding hangout. Today we're going to continue working on the Jerry Life caregiving app, building it in Django with the Plotly Express plotting library. We've recently worked on some data visualization in a separate task that's not been merged into the current branch I'm on, so it's not visible here. Just wanted to mention our use of Plotly Express. What I'm working on is a feature, a part of our data model. We want to, essentially the goal is to improve well-being or wellness of elderly people in institutional care. So these are small and large retirement homes and skilled nursing facilities that have, a few or many residents. And these homes want to ensure that the residents are living fulfilling lives. And we're tracking two aspects of the service that they're providing. One is the type of work that they're doing, part of their daily duties, such as cleaning or food preparation, dispensing medication. And these are the fundamental baseline duties that are necessary for providing quality of life. On top of that, or in addition, we want to also raise awareness about the wellness in terms of fulfillment that residents are experiencing through activities like going outside in nature, going to a concert, having reminiscence cafes, like where we hang out, talk, drink coffee, and just enjoy some time together. So those are two levels of well-being that we're wanting to track over time, measure, and it's kind of hard to quantify, but measure the number of activities and then make it visible through data visualization. But the aim that this insight can help the service providers improve and guarantee the wellness of their residents under their care. That said, we're working on this residence model, which is pretty much the service revolves around the resident. And so it's a very important aspect of our data model. So what we're going to do is, in order to represent residents, which are people essentially, but the name resident is what I'm using here for historical reasons. We may refactor this to be people. The thing is, caregivers are also people, and so we have particular nouns for caregivers and residents to distinguish them in our system. So maybe that's the right level of abstraction in our data model. So we have this resident aspect. And one thing we realized after our first year in use is that residents, not only do they come and go, they can even move around the care community. So we can't have a fixed representation of a resident, that this resident lives in this home. We needed a way to represent the time-bound nature of a residency, which is why we have this second entity here. It's distinct from a resident because, as mentioned, one person can move in to a home and move out of that home, but it can also move into another home. And our tool should be able to illuminate the whole time span. So I've got this small window here, the entire breadth of their time in the community, which might include multiple houses. Similarly, conversely, the home analytics, which are the way we represent the activities in the home, they revolve around residencies, residents who are living in the home for a particular time period. And in order to accurately reflect the quality of service in a particular home, we need to know who is living there at particular points in time. So that's a long way of saying we need two entities to represent this. to these use cases that a person lives at a home for a particular period, moving in and moving out of that, but also that people they have some specific information, such as their name and whether or not they're able to participate in well-being activities. Sometimes a resident might be sick or otherwise not able to be kind of selected for these activities. And part of our application helps caregivers to plan their day and choose which residents to engage in various types of activities. So having an exclusion rule that says this resident is not able to participate in general, we found was useful addition. This tool has been in development for about almost 6 years now, I think, and we've learned some, lessons on the way. It's been under evolution through direct experience. And what I'm doing here in this Django application, I'll just briefly mention, is just rewriting our previous code base in Python and Django, mainly for stability and continuity purposes. The previous minimum viable tool took us quite far, and we learned a lot from it. But there's a broad community of stewards and foundation that are providing longevity for the project, and we want to build our project on stable ground. So there's a few little details that I'm going to need to clean up first. If we look back here at this, one small thing is that this residency object doesn't have a particular string representation, or interestingly, they do have a string representation, but this particular one doesn't. Huh. Maybe there's something about the historical data for this recent actions chart that it snapshots this string representation. All right, well, I'll leave that alone. That's not a problem. Well, essentially what we're going to do is start writing the front-end code for this, so to speak, and we're not reusing a front-end framework or anything heavy like that. Simplicity is the other aim of this refactor or rewrite, and introducing a front-end framework is not only overly complicated, but it actually throws out a lot of really interesting and powerful things that the Django templating framework provides, or makes us reinvent those or go seeking to cobble together our own front-end library framework. In some cases, things like routing, and which is built into the app Django framework, of course, and then other things like the templating syntax, which is also just pretty much HTML and CSS. And you can put JavaScript there as well, so it's web standards adherent or aligned. So for these reasons, simplicity and longevity and standards and alignment, I'm going to use the Django templating language and sprinkling JavaScript as needed, but typically we're really not having to use much JavaScript. Not that I dislike the language. I've been burnt by the ecosystem, and it's generally overkill for this style of application, web application. So we need a way to represent all these things in the front end. So let's just take a look at the code. We've got our new residence app. We've got one URL pattern to view a resident. For example, if I go to residence and I view this person, we just render a little bit of detail. We can put in any other context here, template context we need, and even feed that into JavaScript, progressively enhanced JavaScript framework like Vue, or something that doesn't completely override or consume the front end. So what I'll work on in the residence section is a way of listing residents, which we've found useful in the past, as well as adding a resident, and I have to look at the way we add residencies, but that'll probably also exist on like this residence page, which doesn't exist. So let's go ahead and dig into that a little bit. So we'll need a view And Django provides us a view called like a list view. So we can start with that. And we may even want to paginate this. So there's our list view documentation. So keep an eye over here on the chat if anyone's viewing this. I'll try to respond to any questions or comments in real time. So we're just gonna, let's see, follow this recipe here. So we've got our views, pi for residents, and generic list, import list view. So we need to import that. We've got our model imported. Resident, we'll start at the resident level and figure the residencies part later. And now we're going to create a class. Inheriting from list view, the model will be a resident. And it does let us paginate fairly straightforwardly. Yeah, and we don't need to override the context or anything for now. Let's just list all the residents. We're dealing with less than 10 or less than 100. In any case, this is a testing environment, but we'll need to add pagination. It will be desirable at some point. So now we're going to wire up our URL, which would just be, I think this should come, if I recall the URL patterns. I'm not sure if the catch-all, they are the first pattern that catches the request is the one that renders. I'm not sure if the empty path would catch everything, so I'll just add it at the end. Probably is not an issue. Resident list view. That should be good. Now it'll catch the root, but the template doesn't exist. So we'll just add template resident list and extends our basic HTML and our block. Content, and we're going to localize this. I18N. Just put residence for right now. See if we get something here on the screen. There we go. So we've got our template wired up. Let me just go ahead and add the localization or internationalization to this. A lot of front end stuff. In fact, I haven't localized it at all. Well, I'm going to get in the habit of doing that as we go, because I know this is going to be localized. It first into Suomi, because we're building it here in Finland. Templates. This is an example of by using the Django framework fully, I'm going to be able to use these localization helpers in context without having to search in JavaScript ecosystem and find like what localization framework to use and how it works and stuff. It's all one source, documented extensively, following conventions that are pretty widely adopted. And so I just don't want to waste. It's literally wasting time to have to like reinvent or cobble these kind of details together. So let's see. Templates. Load I18 in. Yeah, so that was right. There. So I'm going to just add a localization here, and I'll swing back around to be more comprehensive with it. As long as it's got a pattern and a practice. And essentially, and it's pretty straightforward, translate. Probably shouldn't have to look this up, but in any case, I did. Translate residence. There we go. Oops. Nice. Looks good. Refresh this. Very good. Now, I don't have an issue for this. Basic earmark. Close this. Let's change here. Screen width. Very cool. 11 closes 13. So adding things out of Word. It's kind of just I'm familiar enough with the project and the previous version that I'm just blazing my own path here. All right, we've got a residence template, so let's just commit that. Looking good. Now we're going to iterate over these residents and figure out a way to display them. And I think a table. So don't laugh, but I'm using Bootstrap. No, but seriously, it's really good. It's mature, and when comparing across these CSS libraries and frameworks, there are some interesting ones, some utility-oriented frameworks. I'm not fully opposed to that, but the main takeaway is that the alternatives to Bootstrap right now have typically one core maintainer. And maybe they've been around a couple of years, but they're not mature in the sense of like having 5 or more years, multiple major releases and refactoring. And they don't have the stability of multiple core maintainers. That's crucial that Bootstrap has. So for that reason alone, I'm not investing in those frameworks. Granted, we've been burnt by a project that had a commercial company behind it, a lot of core developers, and that company pivoted, and the project was sold, and it continues to this day. But it's the core and the ecosystem are very important, and standards adherence. So adherence or alignment. So Bootstrap not only does it, it's basically CSS with a CSS if you need to compile it, but it's following the standards development using Flexbox, for example. It also provides us components, ready-made components, which not all of the utility-oriented libraries that are becoming more popular, they're not always offering that level of abstraction. Abstraction is useful. I like a library or a framework that has some useful abstractions and doesn't make me write a bunch of verbose styling. So that's where I'm at with the decision on Bootstrap. We're just going to see how they style tables here. We can use regular. Yeah, it's not the most exciting, but it is fairly innovative and stable. Tables. We are using Bootstrap 5. Maybe accent's not so important. I just want to make sure. So yeah. The semantics are fairly straightforward with the classes, not very verbose. So okay, so the context object would like to be residence. Alright, so that's just the top level. Alright, so just checking the text works, but we do want to check it. If there are residents, then we'll display them, otherwise we'll display no residents found. Active. I'm checking my conditional work. So we want a table. Class equals table. Oh yes, yeah, and oh yeah, t head then tr. This was one thing we'll have to reassess. It's very like Western to have a first name or a given name. Typically, it's given name with this. What is it called? The micro formats uses given name, but even first and last are not always right. But in our data model, this is what we're using. Yeah. Yeah, there's enough to learn and remember with the web standards. I just want to focus on that. Just simple things like HTML table syntax. Not mix in some other syntax unnecessarily or unuseful. Like this is mixing in syntax though. So. Let's go call. So then So we'll create a row for each resident and 2 columns. These are not rows, these are headers. I'm misreading this. It's good for now. It's alright. We should have an icon there, probably, or icon up here. Alright. I will need to do pagination. I'm just not sure if I want to tackle it right at this moment. I'll come into it another. Well, let me think what's more useful right now, because I'm going to have to add a residence modal or some way of adding resident. This could be a link to a page, is even easier. I think that's more useful. And then it'll beg the pagination feature. So one moment I'll refresh my T and we'll add a new view, URL, and template with a form to create a resident in its own, right here, residence add, something like that. I'm not going to do a modal. It would be nice feature to just add a resident here and not have to navigate away from the page, but and it's not super difficult. I have example working code, but it's simpler just to use a route for it. So I'll be right back. All right, so I'm just thinking through the user experience, and I'm aware that this is a first pass just to get some basic functionality in place. Basically, the user experience for this residence feature, you'll add a resident by clicking a modal. It'll take you to a form page where you enter the details for this person, and then you'll be redirected back to this residence page. The reason, as a first step, I'm going to go with that, and I know it's going to be awkward because then you'll have to add a residency for that person, which adds an additional step and additional friction. So we'll need to smooth over that user experience, definitely. But that'll be through a review process and feedback. And I do have some initial insight as how we've done it in our previous app, but it might be an opportunity to reassess that, the user experience here. So again, I'm just going to kind of not cut a corner, but I'm going to take the initial step to it might seem like I'm cutting a usability corner, but I'm really just trying to move forward, getting foundation in place that we can then refine later. Yeah. So we'll add a button here, but first I need to look up these generic class-based views that we're going to create. Basically these CRUD views, but we're only going to create right now. Not going to destroy. Or we have a read. We've got a detail view, and we will need an update view. But the next one will be the create view. Create. I think it's just view. So this authorization, we'll need to look at that as well. We don't have any roles. And see how Django does it. I don't have to invent authorization. I think in our previous project we had to sort of more or less invent things like authorization from scratch. I think Django will give us some primitives for that, but it's not going to, if I recall, it's not going to, it gives us authentication, which is also what a previous framework did. The authorization can get a little bit granular, and I don't think it gives us granular authorization. In other words, acting on a specific resident, if you have permission to act on that person's record, or at a home level, we have to write that granular of a authorization code. But if we have just some system-wide like role, Django does provide roles like an administrator or staff person. So we want to create a create view. An authorization will come next. I have to take one step at a time, of course. Here, I got it in views. Form view, create view. And generic edit. Create view. Iterable, you can use a tuple here. For the create view, I don't suspect we'll want to put them on immediate hiatus. Or maybe. I don't know. Oops. No. Never know. Can't anticipate all use cases. Got the view. We got a URL pattern. And I could call resident create, resident add. Try to be consistent where possible. But I also have to think about what a person would be. They're typically adding a resident. Let's create. awkward. First you have to create it, and you can see the details anyways alphabetical. So now I can create a link here. This is a bit tricky, if I recall correctly. Putting a button in the header might give me a little bit of trouble. I don't need to look like that. I'm just going to see if it appears there, and woo! Just less emphasis there. Let's see if this works. Yeah. Saves in a few keystrokes. Everything's looking good. And it's actually an anchor though. Oh, I'm having flashbacks to the 90s all of a sudden. The href. This is going to be a URL. So to Untitled. It's no quote here. To wow. That's a create view, I think was it. Right. Okay. And this is resident form, so naturally you'll need the onHiatus field. I believe it'll be used for the edit view as well. Uh-oh. Nope. Yeah. There's where I can say create or edit resident conditionally, but depending on what type of action we're performing here. I think that key is cool. And let's see if it works. So there's the form in place. Very cool. And since it's auto-generating the form, and you know it's using just for standard HTML elements, Bootstrap has some nice classes for this, and to give forms just a little bit more aesthetic and possibly some other usability features. In order to do that, I would use the Bootstrap classes and such. I would need to either create this form, you know, myself, or use Crispy Forms. Django, for example, if it's got Bootstrap 5 support. Hopefully. Crispy Forms template pack. Oh no. Yeah, it's tailwind. Very cool. Ah, just an add-on for it. Cool. Just need both of them. All right, so let's go ahead and close this for a second. Oh, it's already there. All right, so I'm imagining this is there as well. All right, so then I think you can just do form crispy. Crispy. Oh, of course. Ooh, yeah. Load crispy, right? No! Guessing. What's new element? Well, you read the manual. Crispy. Crispy. Load crispy forms tags. Okay. Let's load them more. Crispy form. Ah. Let's see if this works. Whoops. Yeah, there we go. Let's use this syntax. Yeah, it doesn't make any visual change because it's loading the same stuff, but this allows me to pass in a form helper, which might be useful. What's the other one? Doesn't. Yeah. Okay. And in success URL, I define the in the view. Well, do I want to go to the resident or the resident table? I think the resident would be fine. Oh, but it didn't do. What it said it would do. Alright, well that's fine. Unfortunate. I think it's because I'm using the Bootstrap 5 add-on that doesn't follow that convention. Well, so I don't get any unexpected behavior later. I'm going to use this form crispy. That way I don't get form markup within form markup if ever that issue is resolved where the inconsistency with these get added by using the crispy form helper instead of the form piped to the crispy. Class Method. Yeah, no, method is so submit. This would be that. Whoops. And method, which may be default. Crispy. Oh well, let's not call them crispy. But how about hanky? T, not hanky P. Anyway, resident. Oops, I see what you're doing. The action. Okay. What? Refresh that. Entity helpless. There we go. Redirect correctly. That's a pretty good stopping point. I've got the form to input the residence, and we'll add one more details of button up here, and we need to go to the residence page. That way I can double check if the residence exists. So for that, we're going to go to our core. No, core templates is usually where I put the. In this case, we just put it at the base. We get a navigation template, and for each item is a form. It's modals. Add work, and here I'll add localization. It will be inconsistent. Yes. No. Residence will list me. Yeah, we'll have to translate that. Whoop. Oh, come on. It's supposed to take it in there. Refresh. Oh no. Singular, I guess. Very cool, and a hanky. So, and all of this localization is just since I'm already working in this particular file, then I'll clean it up where I'm at. But first, I'm going to commit these changes. With forms and template. Well, it's essentially the whole thing. Got a URL involved. Got a page involved. Singular, plural, I'm not sure, but that's what it is. And just add missing localization real quick while we're here. While we're on the navigation menu. I'll leave it capitalized. Copy and paste editor, but whoa, hey, that's cool. Huh. That's handy. Good thing I accidentally discovered that feature. Yeah, that's just our product, so we're not probably going to localize that. Yeah, and just make sure they introduce any errors, that the nav bar renders correctly, and the text is there, work report, and everything works as expected. I'm going to remove this. I'm pretty sure I'm going to remove that. One last thing. Yeah, quite a couple minutes. Link to the resident page. When we click it, we should see the resident detail. It could just be a small button, icon, and help text, hover text. Let's do that. We're in the resident list. So we'll add an empty header view. I guess I could say view. That's right. Yeah, the heading gets scoped to the column, not the row. Heading view. And then later. Small button. And oh, URL is and we'll be passing that. Yeah. I think that should work. Just some text there for one moment, and I'll just change it to an icon, hover text, because we like the column header. I don't want to. Ooh. I hope we're not breaking something else. Resident list and a bit of text there. I think we've got the bootstrap icons here. Well, maybe the icon would be a little bit better. I feel single quotes, so we don't mix double quotes. Title, placement. Pretty good. Cool. Click that. Be resident. Cool. Schools out. Looking good. All right. So I did right. And yes. Very cool. All right. All the changes are in GitHub, and there will be some more changes I'll need to do in this pull request. So I'm going to leave it open, this branch open, and continue to do a few more refinements relating to the residencies. I believe it's going to be a big chunk of work, but it's foundational. It's like the cornerstone of this project. So deserves time and attention. Thank you very much for your time, and have a great day.